Claire Edwards from Brain Smart People Development, and you're listening to Rawthentic Leadership, a series of conversations, insights and inspirations with leaders who are real, raw and authentic. Today I bring you an insightful conversation where, in all honesty, I found it a challenge to stay on track with our leadership topic because my guest was a master at his topic. What ensued, though, was a fascinating insight into the world of high performance in sport, club culture, and eventually an exploration of our critically important leadership topic. Enjoy! My first encounter with Matt Cameron was a Zoom meeting to prepare for a leadership event that we were both involved in, and we wanted to make sure that our messages aligned. And knowing how busy Matt was, it was just before Christmas. I was expecting like a quick 15-minute check-in. But instead, Matt spent nearly an hour with me. And it was then that I knew that I'd finally secured a guest for a leadership topic that I've been wanting to talk about for a long time. Now, look, given what I've just shared, you could think maybe it's generosity. But it's not. So today, I'm going to be in conversation with Matthew Cameron, Rugby League CEO of the Penrith Panthers, on the essence of humility in leadership. So before I bring Matt in, for anyone who doesn't know much about rugby league, or for our overseas listeners, the Penrith Panthers are a professional rugby league team based in Western Sydney. And they've been on an incredible journey over the past few years, coming from behind to win the grand final in 2021 and 2022. And I'm sure Matt will share some of their other wins, including off the field. So, Matthew Cameron, a very warm welcome to Rawthentic Leadership.
Hello, Claire. Thanks for having me.
I've been trying to get you on this for so long. I've been almost stalking you. And I'm not sure if it's to do with your role and how busy you are, or your reluctance to actually talk about humility. But in any case, we're here. So, listen, before we delve into, I suppose, why humility is such an important trait in leadership, can you share with us a little bit about your career journey and how you came to work in rugby league? Because I'm assuming you haven't been in rugby league all your life.
No, correct. And I sort of tumbled into it in some ways. I was a school teacher for a long time before I sort of got into professional sports. Went to school at a Catholic school in Western Sydney that was run by the Patrician brothers at that point in time, and then went on to university and studied teaching and came back and actually took a job at the same school where I went to school. And I can still remember the interview. The principal that was there when I was at school interviewed me, and the first question he asked had nothing to do with the interview. It was about how's mum and dad, and how's your older brother, and those type of things. And the head of the department that interviewed me was the head of the department when I was a kid. So it was a very, relaxed, I suppose, environment to go into.
But that was a bit of a spin out, though.
It was. It was. I was there. I had all these, standard interview question and responses ready to go. And first question out of the blocks, Bernard wanted to know how mum and dad were and how's life in Toongabbie and all those sorts of things. So it was good. I taught Patrician Brothers at Blacktown for 18 years.
Mm-hmm. And can I just ask, Matt, what subject did you teach?
Industrial arts, woodwork predominantly. So,
okay.
And then branched into a little bit of, at that point in time in the syllabus, there was a course called Sport, Lifestyle and Recreation, and the school had a very big rugby league program. So we had a lot of the boys that were there playing rugby league sort of siphoned into one class where they could study the syllabus, but we just made some of the classwork and some of the assessment tasks a little bit more rugby league orientated than pure sport specific. So I did that for 18 years. During that time, I got involved with the Parramatta Eels just on the side a little bit, just as a sports trainer. And that morphed into a little bit of coaching, and then I was coaching the school team. And then had the opportunity in 2006, one of the coaches at the Eels at that point in time, Peter Sharp, had accepted a job in the Super League in England. And Brian Smith, the head coach at the time, offered me the rest of the season. It was Easter. And he said, do you want to come in and do the rest of the season? And that was the 2006 season, and they'd sort of started. They were a bit scratchy when they started, so they were under pressure a little bit. They went to the boss at that point in time and and asked him if I could have 2 terms off. I had 20 odd weeks of long service up my sleeve. So, jumped in and loved it, fell in love with it, and coached professionally in the role of assistant NRL coach at the Eels through to about 2012. And then they'd gone through, a couple of coaches at that point in time. And I probably realised that I couldn't go any further with what I was trying to establish there. And simultaneously, Phil Gould had come out to Penrith. Penrith were going through a bit of a transition at that point in time, and through a third party, I had a couple of conversations with the club and ended up coming out here in the role of high performance manager, and it was more about just aligning all their pathways programs, just getting everything under the NRL lined up. And at that point in time, Ivan Cleary was head coach. He'd come in that 2012 season. So I spent 3 years doing that. Obviously, Ivan transitioned away from the club at that point in time. I went and spent a year doing something else. And then came back to the club in 2016, and then came back in a similar role, and that sort of morphed into general manager of Rugby League, and then just through some staff changes here at the club about 18 months ago, that role sort of turned into the CEO of Rugby League. We've got a group CEO, Brian Fletcher, who, he's incredibly busy, managing the group, 5 licensed clubs. So he sort of does a lot of work with the group, and then I sort of look after Rugby League in conjunction with the head coach. So.
I like that. We're talking about humility and just hearing your own words back. Well, that role turned into the CEO, not and I was promoted to CEO. Just a quick question, Matt. From what you're doing now, is there anything that you miss from your coaching days, or are you able to utilise most of what you learnt in your role now?
Well, coaching for me was an extension of teaching. I think it's like if you talk to people that are in sales, I'm generalising. I'm sure people will go, that's not actually correct. But I sort of feel, selling a car or selling a house, I suppose the principles are the same. And I feel like, definitely coaching is an extension of teaching. And I actually do miss teaching. I miss, the best part about teaching was going to class and, all right, boys, get your jobs out and sitting them down and actually showing them a skill and getting them to go away and try and replicate it. And if they could get it, great. If they couldn't, help them get it, type of thing. So that part of it is very transferable into coaching. So I do miss that part. I do miss. I don't miss being out on the field these days. In the blistering sun in Penrith at 40 degrees at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. I definitely don't miss that. And the hours are quite demanding from a coaching point of view. So that's sort of one part of it that I really, I give a lot of credit to the guys that are doing it in the business.
Yeah.
But I suppose I just miss a little bit of interaction with students, with players. My job now, I feel like I've got the greatest job in the world because I can actually tell a young man that he's going to be a professional rugby league player, once we make that decision internally. But I feel sometimes I've also got the worst job in the world because at some point in time I'm going to have to tell that young man that he's either not good enough anymore or that we can't afford to keep him. So it's quite a paradox sometimes.
How do you balance that? What do you draw on to have those conversations?
What I found teaching and what I found coaching and what I'm now finding, from an administrational point of view, definitely from a teaching point of view, is students can sniff someone out straight away that is not on task or getting done what needs to get done. The phrase I used to use with when I used to have prac teachers, I'd say, the kids can smell a fraud straight away if you're not prepared, if you're not ready to go, and you don't have a level of care or caring. Like the students can sort of see that a mile away, and I think that's even more true in professional sports. And I never played at the elite level, so my history from a coaching point of view has always been around, the players. They're not interested in how much you know; they're interested in how much you care. Because it's about they're in the game for a very short period of time, and they want to obviously achieve goals that they set, from childhood, a lot of them. My experience is when you can show a young man or a young woman, and you can show them a pathway and you can show them how much you actually care about them achieving it, that is way more powerful than trying to show someone how smart you are or how much you know.
And I suppose that then leads into the topic of our conversation around humility. And just, I think, to clarify before we move on, what the essence of humility is, what it is and what it isn't. So it's not about being subservient to other people, but it is about being of service. And that's what you were talking about caring and about having, I suppose, the self-awareness to know and acknowledge what your limitations are, and maybe, surround yourself with people who are better than you. Would you agree with that, Matt? Is that a way that you work, or have you got your own definition?
Yeah, no, you're on track there, 100%. In our business, I'm sitting in my office this morning. We've got a big rugby league program that's obviously, the focal point of that is the head coach and the first grade team or squad. Mm-hmm. But then the business has a commercial division as well, which, like rugby league for us is close to a $40 million a year business. And I jokingly say quite often I'll have staff in my office and I'll just go, I'm just a woodwork teacher. Someone explain to me how to do this, But it's partly true. Like I said, we've got a very big commercial division, and I don't come from a commercial background. I come from a coaching background. So, my expertise in the business at the moment is two things. It's one, running the salary cap and the contracting model for the club. Mm-hmm. But I say to people all the time, my job is to create an environment in the office where other people can flourish. I'm not a marketer. I'm not a membership expert. I'm not a sponsorship expert.
Yeah.
But you've been through the office. Like, I've got a team out there that are, in my opinion, world class. I don't need to be a marketing expert because I've got a team that can do that for me, and I feel like if I can provide an environment where I can support them to do what they need to do, then everyone's going to benefit from that. So.
Absolutely. And yes, and I have to thank you, because you invited me to watch pre-season training, and I thought, okay, that's great. I'll maybe have a bite to eat and watch pre-season training. And actually you organised a whole day where I got to meet the team. And I mean, what I got from that, just the culture of care, the culture of well-being. And I suppose a question that I wanted to ask is around humility. I mean, if we take the players, for example, they're in the limelight. We know that they're well paid. They're highly talented. Where does humility come into the culture of the Panthers?
Yeah, for sure. When Ivan came back in 2019, that first season that he was back at the club, we didn't have a great year. We finished outside the 8. And in that off-season, pre-season, we actually went on this adventure of, obviously there's a book out there, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And we really dug into, at the very start of it, like a level of vulnerability-based trust. Because the organisation at that point in time was obviously any team in the NRL, irrespective of whether they're coming first or 17th at the moment, despite what the public and fans and people in the paper and media, and every one of those clubs is a highly functioning organisation, because you just can't be in professional sports if you're not. It just functions at different levels. That's the difference between the clubs at the moment that are being very successful at the top and the clubs that aren't. It just functions at different levels, that's all. But we went down this vulnerability-based trust path. And as you would know, for that to have power in an organisation, it's got to start with the biggest person in the room. And Ivan led it, and he set the tone. And because he was so open and honest, and with his career and where he thought the team and the club was heading, and his past history at the club, it actually, it gave permission for everyone else that was in the room at that point in time to, speak openly and freely. And then I suppose the other bit that we really addressed was there was a fear of conflict within the office, and I'm sure that happens in any professional organisation from time to time at differing levels. And I feel over the journey, over that sort of, 219, 220, we played in the 220 grand final and obviously successful in 21 and 22. A lot of what we've been able to achieve as an organisation started with that. We talk about climbing Everest. You might have seen, particularly off the back of the 2021 success, references about Everest. And we've got a little, and I think I've shown it, you've seen it before, it's a little diagram. And the thing we like about Everest is it's a repeatable event. So for us, as an NRL organisation, season after season after season are repeatable events. So that, and you sort of, if you get something wrong in one season and you don't quite achieve the outcome you're looking for, you can dig into it, address it, improve it, and then try and repeat it again the next season. So those two things have been the cornerstone of what we've been trying to do here over the last couple of years. And that has allowed us to get better in the wellbeing space, get better in the coaching space, get better in the commercial side of the business. Because one of the things, when you touch on the culture of the organisation, one of the things I think we've been able to do really well is the whole business is aligned in terms of what we're trying to achieve first and foremost as a business, but the way that we actually structure and run what exists under the NRL in terms of all our pathways. So all the, like reserve grade, the under 21s, under 19s, under 17s, under 15s, the girls programs, all of those programs are actually delivered and coached pretty much in exactly the same way. So we've got this little pipeline of players coming into the system at a younger age. We talk about the funnel. They come in at the top and through good coaching, good practice, like when we get to the bottom, there's a subset of that funnel that pop out the other at the bottom end of it that we think are ready to go first grade players.
Yeah. In your true humble style, you're talking about everybody else, but I want to talk about you.
No. Yeah, I've said this to you before. I'm just a little cog in a big machine. Simple as that.
But you're a little cog in a big machine. What happens when that little cog isn't working? The whole machine doesn't work.
Yes and no. Well, I'd like to think I've got this belief, and I say to people, I love people to come through the office on a Monday and they shouldn't be able to tell whether we've won or lost on the week. Because I have worked with coaches previously that, like if you had a loss on the weekend and everyone lived on eggshells and, and I don't want that. I don't want that environment in this office. Like obviously and it's very easy for me to say that at the moment when you lose, 11 games in 3 seasons over the last 3 years. It's without getting too far ahead of ourselves. But I genuinely believe that, like, I want people to get out of bed every morning and come to work, wanting to come to work because they enjoy doing their job. I couldn't think of anything worse than someone getting out of bed and loathing having to go and do whatever they do during the day. I like that environment.
And it's palpable. I mean, I was lucky enough to be able to sit in one of the team meetings and with sort of Ivan facilitating it rather than running it, and then 2 of the players getting up and leading the meeting. So it's a culture of care, it's a culture of well-being, but I think it's also a culture of empowerment, isn't it? And I suppose one of the questions I wanted to ask related to that is, we'll turn it over to the players rather than you. Say you have a new player come in and there is a bit of ego there, and a bit of a lack of humility. How do the team work with that?
Yeah, we in line with the other things that I touched on in terms of vulnerability-based trust and trying to work through not having a fear of conflict. The other thing that I think we do really well is there's a really high level of peer-to-peer accountability. Yeah, and you would have noticed, or maybe not. You maybe would have not noticed as much that day, but. And we do a lot of storytelling as well, and we've spoken about this in the past. So that new player, I would like, and we've got a couple of them this year. We've got 4 boys that are come into the full-time squad this year from other clubs, and I would like to think that the way that we introduce those players into the first grade squad sets a bit of a benchmark on our expectations, I suppose. Mm-hmm. And I think when you're in the building, it's very clear to see what our culture is and what it looks like, how it acts, how it feels when you're part of it. Yeah. And then the icing on the cake for us, and people people made a bit of a song and dance about it a couple of weeks ago with an incident that was captured after the game between Jamin Salmon and Jerome Luai.
Yeah.
After the loss against the Broncos, I think the game was like, that's peer-to-peer accountability, at its highest level. It's just unfortunate it got captured on national TV and people wanted to talk about it for 2 days. But that goes on the field, 10 times a game every week. And it goes on within our business all day, every day, because we would like to think that, if there's something that's amiss or something that doesn't fit within our value system, that, we're going to address it. We're not going to, people don't stand on the rooftop and call it out and those sorts of things, but we address it, and I think we address it in a healthy way. And you would have seen it, like when you address it in that way, we have a level of comfort with our players where they are comfortable getting up in front of the group and talking about, you would have seen, I think the meeting you were in, they were just doing some prep for training, and you would have seen that the players that got up and spoke, it was about, a level of or a degree of accuracy that they wanted out of the session.
Yeah.
A level of intensity and making sure that they were hitting the markers and those sorts of things. So.
And it's interesting because you've got the peer-to-peer accountability, but what you haven't got, what I saw and what I experienced was a no blame culture. So, and that's a fine line. So how do you achieve that balance between accountability and no blame? And I know this is a bit of a curveball because it wasn't a question that I was going to ask you, but I'm really curious.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, I feel like it's taken us a while to get there. We're not perfect. That's the first thing I just want to point out to anyone that's listening to this. Like, we are far from a perfect organisation here. We're striving every day to get better in these spaces. And I feel that the culture that we've come from did have that element of blame to it. Mm-hmm. I feel the environment that the head coach has created on the football side of the business allows players to be themselves. And I feel like when you sort of wrap all that up and put a bow around it, it's morphed from one to the other. And I think, the storytelling is probably a big part of it. Every morning we have a check-in meeting. Players have a check-in meeting, and quite often at that check-in meeting, Kev Kingston is our wellbeing manager. He'll get a player down and he'll sort of delve into their life, their past, their history, their playing career, if they've come from a different club, those sorts of things. And I think it really gives an insight, and I feel I use those four new players that we've got this year, within the space of the summer, our pre-season. I think the rest of the group would have formed they're just a player that they played against previously, but, obviously coming in, listening to someone's story, and some of them are so powerful. Yeah, it really changes perspectives within the group. You then interact and you relate to others on a incredibly different level, I suppose. When there are issues and the way that we address them, they then become issues that are addressed, respectfully and in the right way. They don't become, people storming out of the dressing shed at the end of the day, getting in their car and leaving them unaddressed, because I feel like, we don't have a fear of conflict in this building. So when there are issues, we talk about them. We don't rant and rave about them, but we talk about them constructively. And Ivan is a collaborator. He's interested in other people's opinions. And I think when you sort of box all that up, that's reflected in where we're at, as an organisation. Forget the grand finals, but that's just us as an organisation. Like we could have lost both those grand finals, and we'd still be the same organisation, I'd like to think. So,
yeah, and I think that the power of the storytelling to create that psychological safety, because you've got such, a diverse group of people coming together, such different backgrounds, to be able to come together and bring your whole self to work, because it is their job, and not be judged.
Yeah, I quite often say to people, when we get it right, we're on the back page of the paper. When we get it wrong, we're on the front page of the paper.
Yeah.
So it's an incredible juggle for the coaches to be able to to manage that on a day-to-day basis. And I suppose from Ivan, like Ivan's been responsible for a team, as are the rest of the coaches and the performance staff and everyone else involved in football. But he's also responsible for a staff on top of that. So it's, and then I'm responsible for a staff on the commercial side of the building. So it is a juggling act, but I'd like to think that we've, and we talk about that pyramid, we talk about that base, and I feel like we've got the base right. We're not perfect, but I think we've got it where we need to get it, and then we can address the pretty things on the top of it. But without the base, everyone's just wasting their time.
Absolutely. So coming back to you,
really, me? Right, okay. The little cog in the big machine, yes.
yeah, the very important little cog in the big machine.
I don't know about that.
I mean, an element of humility, and you have alluded to it already about, acknowledging that you don't have all the answers. Is there an example that you can share where you were able to call on somebody else? Somebody else came up with a great idea, or you were able to call on somebody else.
Yeah, for sure. Like I suppose in our business, and I suppose it's like any other business, I can only compare. I was a teacher and then I've worked in football. So I've never worked in a bank. I've never worked in government, any of those sorts of things. But, you're right. There's always going to be smart people in the room. And like in our business, we're quite often interested in how other NRL clubs are doing things. I'm not to the point where if one NRL club wants to jump off a cliff, we're all going to jump off a cliff. I'm not meaning it like that.
Yeah.
We've got two women that have come into our business in the last 18 months, one in the merchandise area and one in the membership area. And the one in the merchandise area has come from a massive merchandise sporting base, a national company. And we're just a little business. Like she's gone from... She came from being 2IC in a business of 50 people to being her and one other girl.
Wow.
And the merchandise part of what NRL clubs do is very important to our business, but it's not our core business. So it's something that's, quite often just gets bolted on to the side of what we're doing. And she's been able to come in and, she challenged me on a number of things. And the $1 million question all the time is, why do you do it like that? I go, well, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. It's in part. I'm sure it probably part of it is historical, because that's the amount of times people say, well, that's the way we've always done it. And I was very comfortable with her challenging me on, well, I think there's a better way to do it. And I was very, as I said, I'm a woodwork teacher that's managing a salary cap. I said to her, well, show me. Challenge me,
Yeah.
And our merchandise program has tripled in the last 3 years. I'm very comfortable with people coming into our organisation from other areas or other clubs that clearly, do it better than we do it historically, and picking up ideas and being challenged on those sorts of things and being shown a better way to do it. And I'll quite often say to them, knock yourself out. Like you show me the validity of what you want to do and the balance sheet that goes with it, and I'll back you to the hill. So,
and yeah, I mean that openness to feedback to new ideas, it's so important. It stimulates innovation, creativity, and as you just said, the return on investment that you got from being open to that is significant. And actually, on the theme of being open, when we met, we were talking about an open door policy, and in addition to being humble, you're extremely accessible. How on earth do you balance your accessibility and your open door policy with everything that you need to achieve?
Yeah, well, it's funny you ask that question. One of the girls in the office has just remodeled her office, and there's a spare couch, and we've actually put the couch outside my door, and it's the running joke. You can just take a number and sit on the couch for a minute. So, the open door policy actually comes from when I was teaching. As I said, I worked for the Patrician Brothers, and I had a principal who was my boss for pretty much the 17 of the 18 years that I taught. His name was Patrick Lovegrove, and and he had an open door policy as the principal of the school, and you knew if the door was open, you could knock on the door and go in, and if the door was closed, clearly he was dealing with an issue or a parent or a student and that sort of thing. So I suppose I've carried that with me, and it's like anything. Like I'll get 100 phone calls a day, but each one of them is 45 seconds long, and it's a little bit like when people come in, like you can solve their problem in 30 seconds, as opposed to leaving the door closed or compounding it or making it 2 days later, that type of thing. So I feel like, and a footy club is, again, I'm sure it's like other businesses. It's a lot of what we do is like on the run. It's always changing. There's always things going on. And I've actually got a little bit of a habit. I try and get into the office, and when I get in, I probably for half an hour, I try to see what emails are there. And I still use a paper diary. I've still got like a diary open on my desk, and I sit there and I make scribble notes of what I've got to try and do today. So a little bit of a to-do list. I'm still like put a line through that, highlight that, what's important type of thing, and then it's almost like right out of the gates, off we go. The day's on, because the unfortunate thing in football is the afternoons tend to spiral sometimes, and it's because you might have a injury on the training field, or you might have a contract negotiation that finds its way into the newspapers or those type of things. So, for me, like I try and make all my meetings in the morning. I try and set anything that's like fixed time, definitely in the morning, because like by 1 o'clock, it's just some days you just can't rein it back in.
Yeah.
But the open door thing and the accessibility thing, I just think that's imperative to. And I've got a really young staff, I've got if I go out into the commercial office, the average age is probably somewhere between 25 and 30. I would like to think that they are comfortable enough to just wander into my office and talk about whatever they want to talk about. I don't ever want to get to the point where, they don't want to come and talk to me because they're uncomfortable in that respect. So.
You are still coaching, aren't you?
Yes, a little bit.
It's interesting just listening to you there. I think you talk with fondness about the Patrician brothers, and I'm curious about the trait of humility. Was that something that was taught to you? Was it something that just as a kid it was how you were? Was it the influence of your parents? Where does it stem from, Matt?
I think a lot of it, you touched on the Patrician brothers. A lot of it comes from there. I think back when I was a kid, me and mates like played cricket. One of the brothers would coach the cricket team, and then you sort of think, I'm a 14-year-old kid, and this bloke's given up, a couple of afternoons a week. He's given up his Saturdays, driving kids backwards and forwards, and that the school that I went to and the school that I taught at is probably, you could say, is in the middle of a lower socioeconomic area, I suppose, in Western Sydney. And I suppose the Patrician brothers are always, they're founded on education of the poor. And I think back, not so much as a student, but definitely as a teacher. Like, we had kids there that couldn't pay their school fees, but Dad was a bricklayer, and the brothers would go, well, we need that brick wall out the front of the monastery repaired. So, how about you come in on Saturday and you fix that brick wall, and that'll take care of the first half of Joey's school fees type of thing. And I can vividly remember having mums in the library covering books, those type of things, and it was the brothers' way of, we want your son here, and we want to give him the best education he can get, and we're happy to find a way where everyone gets a win out of it. And even at times, like obviously being a woodwork teacher, and all of a sudden the window gets stuck in the monastery, and one of the brothers goes, can you come over and try and get that window open, And when you would look around the monastery, and it would be incredibly sparse, and you'd think these are grown men that have given their whole life to, education, and, a little black and white TV in the corner, and, their possessions, like their worldly possessions weren't great, but it was that sense of sacrifice that they would make,
Wow.
And I think a lot of that, like when I look back, like I probably didn't realise it at the time, but, when I look back at the level of sacrifice that those men made, not only from a teaching point of view, but also like, sport and extracurricular activities and those sorts of things. I probably look back at that thing, yeah, maybe that's where part of it came from. And obviously, mum and dad as well. I'd like to think I'd like to think everyone's a product of their environment, and I had a great environment when I grew up as a kid. So,
thank you for sharing that. That's really important. And now that's got me thinking that, that you had that influence, you had those role models, both in that learning environment and probably your home environment as well. So if like Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great, he talks about this level 5 leadership, and level 5 leadership is personal humility and I've always find this hard to say, an indomitable will. So I'm just curious on your point of view on this, Matt. Is someone, leaders coming up through the ranks who haven't had exposure like you had to that sense of sacrifice or altruism or humility, do you think it can be learned? Is it a trait that can be learned?
I think so, yeah. I have a belief also that everyone should be being mentored by someone, and everyone should be mentoring someone else.
Yes.
And I'm not going to name names, obviously, but I sort of look at my professional career, and I've been lucky. I've had some great mentors from a coaching point of view, and great mentors currently from an administrational point of view in the businesses. Mm-hmm. And I suppose I try and provide that opportunity for people in my office, and not necessarily for every person in my office, but definitely for the middle managers. But yeah, I do. I think it can be learned, and life's different these days. Anyone that's out there that's 50 plus. Clearly, my running joke out there sometimes, we interview young people to come into my office, and I'm not, HR says I can't ask people how old they are, but when I actually work out how old they are, sometimes I go, I've got T-shirts that are older than you. But that's I think if we can, and it comes down to people, their willingness to give up time and energy as well, and take the time to talk to people and listen. And I've got a great mate, Hayden Knowles, who's worked previously at the club. And I was talking to him yesterday, and he was using an example. He was at Golden State Warriors last month, and he went over and he was talking to a lot of the coaches, and we talk about the fact that his favourite thing is talking to someone old in sport. And he said, because the reality is once they're gone, all that IP goes with them.
Yeah.
And he said he spent a week over there, and he spent a couple of days with one of the assistant coaches. And it was the first assistant coach that Steve Kerr hired over there when he took the job. Mm-hmm. And he's 75, and he's coached in college, he's coached in NBA, he's coached at all levels. But it's a great example of, we've got a lot of great people in whatever walk of life, in whatever office that you walk into, that have an incredible amount of IP. And once that person's either departed the business or worst case passes away, like that IP goes with them. So I feel it can be learned. I feel there's probably people, we need to be making the effort to pass it on as well, not be that keeper of the secrets person in the office. So.
And I think when I was speaking to some of the other team members, some of the other managers on the day that I was over there and you weren't around, the level of respect they have for you, I think it's not just coaching that you do, but it might just be 45 seconds, but you're mentoring them as well, aren't you?
Yeah. I think honestly think it's part and parcel of the job, of the role. There's a expectation that, we talk about future-proofing here. There's an expectation that when I'm not here, whoever takes my job, A, should be ready to go, and B, it should be seamless. And I should leave the place in a better state than when I got here.
Yeah.
And we try and do that right across the business. It's the same with the playing group. Like the retention of good players is underpinned by a pathway system. And our pathway system, I think, is the best pathway system in rugby league. But it's all aimed at when we lose a player, and we've lost 2 players this year out of the top 30, two players that have won 2 back-to-back grand finals. But the reality for us is if our pathway system is working or our model underneath is working, then we should be able to just start to promote 2 players from within, because we have what we call a built from within philosophy.
Yeah.
And that's not only in the rugby league part of it, but that's also in the commercial part of it. I've got one of the senior managers within the organisation at the moment started here as an intern 8 years ago.
Wow.
And he's been promoted from within inside the business. So I could go and get someone from outside the business, but I'm a big believer in building from within, and actually when you do that, when you're promoting people from within, it's a hell of a lot easier to keep the business just chugging along because they know what the business looks like, they know what it feels like, they know how it acts when they're in there. So.
And I think they're so well defined, those pathways, that it's something that commercial businesses can learn from as well in terms of succession planning.
Yeah.
I'm realising the time, and I know that you've got a meeting coming up, so I've got
No, you're right. You're right. It's only with the NRL about the CBA, and that's been going on for 12 months. So if I'm 10 minutes late to that meeting, I don't think it's going to make a difference today. So.
Oh, you're a star. Thanks, Matt. I wanted to ask, in terms of your own leadership traits and abilities and characteristics or what have you, what do you still want to develop in yourself?
I still feel, for me professionally, like I'd still like to be working on I don't have a fear of conflict, but dealing with conflict. Because I think that's, like my role in negotiating contracts with player managers, and that's one aspect of it. That's every day for me. It's, I think it's worth $10. I think it's worth $15. Click, hang the phone up. I'm not talking to you for a week. It's those. They don't get that petty. I don't mean it like that, but
yeah.
But there's definitely conflict when you're talking about a young man and his future career earnings. And you might be $100,000 apart on a contract. So it's part of it's the conflict, part of it's the level of negotiation, bringing it back to a mutually beneficial agreement for everyone. But when you've got 50 people working in an office, like, you're kidding yourself if there's not going to be some level of, and whether conflict's the right word or not, but there's always going to be some level of disagreement, some level of, I think we should paint it blue, or I think we should paint it black, that type of thing. So managing that as a senior manager, I think, is imperative, because it's like we've done a really special thing here since 2019. Obviously the club's been around for 50 odd years. They've always been doing special things, but in particular, what Ivan's done with the first grade program, it's taken us 4 or 5 years to get to here. It literally could take 4 or 5 hours to pull it to pieces.
Yeah.
And that is a reality in professional sports. As I said, when we get it, hopefully we get it right tomorrow night, we're on the back page of Friday's paper, but when you get it horribly wrong in some aspects of the business, you end up on the front page of the paper. So.
Yeah, and you have an interesting relationship with the press, don't you?
It's it's a necessary part of the business. They're doing their job. They're helping drive interest in the game. Obviously, like broadcast revenues are massive for professional sports.
Yeah.
And I think there's some great journalists out there. There really is, and when we're talking about the game positively, I think everyone benefits from that. Unfortunately, the world we live in, negative commentary draws clicks, and clicks draws interest, and interest draws revenues, and so it's the fine line between the two. But I'd like to think at the moment, we're in a new season. The attendance numbers from the NRL's point of view are through the roof. You've got two teams that no one thought would be first and second in week 3 playing on Friday night. So it's been positive. They're doing their job. The clubs are doing their job. It's part of the business, and it's not going to go away. And we actually spend a lot of time with our players, educating them at a much younger age on, how to have the positive relationship with the media, because a lot of the players, they do perceive sometimes the media as like in a negative way, I suppose. And we really encourage the journalists that, the club has a solid working relationship with, like we like when they write positive stories about the club. So
I think for those people listening, I think I was so lucky to have spent the day there, but I think to be able to get an insight into the culture of the club was the documentary that came out recently. Okay, yes, I'm biased. I thought it was brilliant, but it does show it it shows elements of the culture that you can see. And I'm just curious, how did that documentary come about?
So when we obviously get to the back end of the season, and we knew in advance that we were going to be in the semis, obviously. And we've got a great digital team here. We've got a couple of young videographers that are superb in what they do. And if anyone's hasn't seen the documentary, or you'd only have to go to our Instagram page as an example.
Yeah, I'll put it on the show notes as well.
The quality of work that these young kids do. So sorry, I keep calling them kids, but they're 20-somethings. So we started just recording like we normally do, but obviously it's a bigger game, so we probably recorded more, and we captured a fair deal of the first week of the semi-finals, and then we won that game. Let's just keep recording more and more, and then by the end of it, we actually had the whole 4 weeks. It was only 3 games, obviously, but the whole 4 weeks of the semi-final period and the grand final, and in the sheds after the game and all that sort of stuff. And one of the videographers sort of started to splice it together with some game footage, and it turned into this thing that we never originally thought it was going to be. Bearing in mind, we had support from Channel 9 when we went to them to air it, because technically Channel 9 own the footage. They own everything between the whistles, basically.
Yeah.
So if you want to use that for commercial purposes or for viewing purposes, like obviously we need permission from the broadcasters, which Channel 9 graciously gave us and worked with us to get it to. Obviously, there was the 3-part documentary that they put on 9 Now, and then there was the condensed version that they ran free to air after the Broncos game, which was sort of, I think there's 45 minutes on the website, but it was only 70 minutes on free to air. So, and when we spoke to them originally, they said, did you have an intent to actually, did you set out thinking we're going to win it and we're going to film it? And I said, mate, I've been working in football for 25 years. If you think from day one we were that brazen that we were telling everyone that we were going to win the grand final, you're sadly mistaken. That's like it's a bit like, what are we going to do about grand final t-shirts? We'll do that after we win the grand final, not
I'm
before.
I'm going to get a tattoo.
Every now and again, you just in a NRL club, you will stumble across a box of t-shirts that were pre-printed, and someone will go, they never won that game. Okay, that's why they're in a box. Go and burn them. Get rid of them quick. So,
oh dear.
It's like, and it's funny, like, years ago, you used to see teams, all of a sudden they'd have a grand final t-shirt on 10 minutes after full time. And we're very, no, you can't do that. Like, that's like you're getting, if someone found out that we were getting that far ahead of ourselves, I'd hate to be in that position.
Not very humble, is it?
No, it's not. It's a bit, yes, definitely getting ahead of yourself. So, but no, it's a great documentary.
It is.
It's for the people who haven't seen it, it's, in dressing sheds, it's post-game celebrations. It's, the highlight for me was the jersey presentation. Ivan actually gets quite emotional a couple of times, particularly with players that were leaving the club that year. And just that level of access is just, you just don't see it.
It's unprecedented. And the themes as well, the Top Gun theme. But we're not going to talk about that because people need to watch the documentary. It's
of course, and it's such a little thing. But one of the things that people have commented to me about is there's no language in it.
Yeah,
and one of our pillars is we want to be a source of community pride. So we want 10-year-olds watching that documentary and falling in love with the Penrith Panthers, and the fact that across 130 odd minutes of footage, there's no language in it. I'm really proud of that. So.
Yeah, and it didn't have to be it didn't even have to be edited and redacted in that way. No. Oh, Matt, I've loved this conversation. I think there's that lovely mix of humility and pride at the same time.
Very proud of what we do out here.
Yeah, and you're such a what you see is what you get leader, and I'm really grateful that I managed to stalk you down and get you to talk on the podcast. I'm absolutely thrilled and very grateful.
We've got a saying out here: the coach does the same thing. I think we do our best work in the shadows. So
yeah. Oh, what a great thought to leave us with, Matt. Thank you so much.
No worries. It's been good. It's been interesting. I've never done one of these before, so it's It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
I'll be promoting the heck out of it in a few weeks. All right. Take care, Matt. Go well.
All right. Thanks, Claire.
Bye. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening, and we hope that this conversation provided the insights and inspiration that you were looking for. Rawthentic Leadership is currently ranking 4th in the top 25 Australian leadership podcasts. We'd love you to help us get to number 1 and to get the key messages about modern day leadership out there. And this is how you can help. Head over to Apple iTunes and do 3 quick things. Subscribe, give us a positive rating, and write a short review. Also, if you can follow us on Spotify and subscribe to the podcast on YouTube by visiting the @BeingBrainsmart channel, we'd really appreciate it. And before you go, if you'd like to know what I do when I'm not interviewing amazing guests, I help people in business to lead better, work smarter, build great teams, and thrive in change. To find out more, head over to the BrainSmart website. That's brain-smart.com to see examples of our programs, or email me, Claire, that's CLARE, @brain-smart.com. Go well, and thanks for listening.